So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. And today we're going to have, as I mentioned before, probably one of my favorite lessons ever. What we're going to be doing today is introducing something that I call vivid grammar. Now, I know from having delivered any number of presentations that the moment you say, we're going to talk about grammar, everybody starts to freak out and say, oh my gosh, that's the last thing I want to hear about. But I can assure you that this grammar is going to be one that's insightful and a lot of fun. The simple idea for today's lessons is that we can use our words as a starting point for creating our pictures. Why is this important? Because I still know that there are many of us who think, I really like this idea of visual thinking, but I'm still concerned that I wouldn't know what picture to draw. Well, here's what this idea of vivid grammar is about. We can start with all the grammar we've learned that has helped us figure out how to be verbal and use that directly to enable us to start to become more visual and start to use more of our pictures. Quick review, vivid thinking, the idea means VI. What does that stand for? Visual. V stands for verbal. And of course, ID stands for interdependent thinking. And you all know what that means. It's no longer enough to just be able to talk about something, nor is it going to be enough to just be able to draw something. We need to do both in order to make sure that our thinking is really complete. To give you an example, I could say, we are of two minds. That, of course, is the verbal way to put it. Or what I could do is I could show it. I could show a picture that literally shows that we are of two minds. Or what I could do is I could do both. I could say it. We're of two minds. And I could show it. And I could use my pictures to make it even more vivid by showing the difference between one part of our mind wants to focus on the words and one part of our mind wants to focus on the images. So that's my best fast example of the power of vivid thinking. Say it, draw it at the same time. When all come together, we really do get the idea. For anybody who's read through my book, Blah, 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 you know that being able to talk about us being of two minds is not enough. I've introduced this briefly, this notion of let's imagine that in our mind we actually have two little creatures. I think it's a much better, more visceral, and more vivid way to think about how our mind works. And our mind is split. And half of our mind we're going to call the fox. The fox is very linear, very clever, very analyzing, perhaps a little self-satisfied. The fox, in our case, represents our verbal mind. Standing in for our visual mind, we're going to have the hummingbird, who is very spatial, very spontaneous, very good at synthesizing multiple different things, but a little bit flighty and forgetful. So these represent our two profound ways of thinking about the world. Now, how does the fox see the world? The fox, as our verbal mind, sees the world as a linear progression of A to B to C to D. There is my idea. Our hummingbird, on the other hand, sees the world as a series of infinitely increasing loops. It's not linear at all. It's almost without time, and space is fully multidimensional. How would they see ideas? Our fox, we've been taught through verbal thinking and verbal grammar to describe our ideas in a linear verbal progression. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. Our hummingbird, on the other hand, is the thing that we want to try to continue to teach to see our world and our idea in terms of what does it look like? What are the pieces? How do they fit together? What are the spatial relationships between them? Again, nothing linear at all, very spatial. And it's the combination of both of these that is going to be so powerful for us. Because we really do need these two halves of our mind to be in balance. But in order to be in balance, they both need some kind of structure to sit on. Something that allows them to have some rules and some structure. Well, the fact is our fox, our verbal mind, has tons and tons of structure. And we call that structure grammar. And this is what we spent years and years learning back when we were in school. It's a terrible word. It's a word that the moment most of us hear it, we start to say, the last thing I want to talk about is grammar. Too boring, too tedious. But it's also very important, and I think we can make it simpler and perhaps even a little bit more fun. To do that, let's see if we can't ask our fox, our verbal mind, to go ahead and walk us through what is verbal grammar really all about. So Fox, you ready to go? Yes. And of course, this is the English version. And for all of you who may speak a language other than English, for whom English may not be your first language, you're going to have to bear with me. And I think that we're going to find that the fundamentals underlying verbal grammar are going to be applicable across almost any language that we can imagine in varying ways. So in the case of English, what we have been taught when it comes to grammar is this. Every sentence demands at a minimum only two elements, a subject and a predicate. Something does something. Now there are lots of nuances there. Something could do something to something else. Something could have something done to it by something else. There could be multiple offshoots, but in the end, every sentence must have, at its simplest, these two things. There are only 8 parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Those 8 pieces are all that we have, combined with this unique grammatical category called tense that indicate when something happens. So what this means is that these 8 parts plus tense combine in fascinating ways to deliver every message that has ever been spoken to us, any idea that has ever been sung, written, put in a poem, recited, or stated in a speech is based on nothing more than these 8 pieces combined with tense. Let me give you an example. Here is a very important sentence, in particular to those of us that are sitting in the United States. I want to read to you the preamble to the United States Constitution. This is a sentence that every school kid in the United States was obligated to learn, and I'm not sure if I ever really understood exactly what it meant, because here's the sentence. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. For anybody in the United States, and many people that have used the American Constitution as a basis for the constitutions in their own country, this is probably one of the most important sentences that has ever been written. And yet if you think about it, if you look at it, it's a struggle. There are many, many verbs. There are many, many nouns. There are many, many adjectives. One has to read it many times to begin to get a clear understanding of what it means. This is what happens when we rely on verbal grammar. Let's let our hummingbird give it a shot for a moment. Let's move away from the verbal side of grammar, and let's see if we can't come up with a visual way of looking at the same thing. Here's what we have. All verbal grammar boils down to this visual model. Every idea must have a subject locked together with a predicate. The subject is a noun or a pronoun. This is the person or thing that's doing it. The predicate is the verb. This is what's happening. These nouns can be modified by adjectives. So for example, this is a hairy person. This verb is modified by an adverb to say this is a fast verb. That's the basics of our sentence. Then we can describe the position of the objects, this person and this other person, in space by using prepositions and conjunctions. And we can describe their position in time by using tense. If we want to increase the emphasis, we can use an interjection at some point to show emphasis. But in the end, this is a visual description of everything that's required to make a verbal statement. Now, why is this important? Because by simplifying grammar into this simple picture, we're going to find that we can make a visual version of it as well. Here is the same sentence. This again is the preamble to the Constitution of the United States, but now taken where the grammar is broken apart visually to say, let's deconstruct that sentence and see if we can't make it very clear. Let's pick the nouns. We. Here we are over here. We. People. Which people? Well, in this case, the people of the United States. That's our noun, our subject. Okay, so where's our predicate? What do we do? Well, we ordain and establish something. What are we going to ordain and establish? Well, this document that we call the Constitution. Now, why would we do that? Why do we need to ordain and establish this? Well, in order to do something. In order, in fact, to do a few things. In order to form a union. In order to establish, justice. In order to ensure, tranquility. In order to provide, for what? Defense. In order to promote, what? Welfare. In order to secure, what? Blessings. So now we see what the Constitution really says is that we are over here. We're going to make this document in order to form, establish, ensure, provide, promote, and secure. What? Well, a nation and all of the things that go along with a nation. So this is what I mean by the visual application of verbal grammar. But this is not what we mean when we really start talking about vivid thinking. Vivid thinking is much more lively and much more visual than that. So let's continue and let me show you. Because we need to still provide a parallel structure. We've got grammar as the structure under our fox. Grammar. Verbal grammar, which we've just looked at. We need some kind of structure underneath our hummingbird. Well, what would that be? Well, how about if we make it a different type of grammar, which is parallel to the verbal grammar, and let's call it vivid grammar. Here's what vivid grammar does. It takes words, like the words we've been reading, and it gives us a very simple way to provide a visual overlay, to turn those words into pictures using a parallel but distinct form of rules and grammar. I'm going to show you now the entire visual summary of vivid grammar. I hope that all of you have had a chance, and if not, you could do it later, to go ahead onto napkinacademy.com, and since you're all associates, you can download the PDF printable version of this vivid grammar. There's a tremendous amount of information and content and ideas in this one simple sheet of paper. So what I think we're going to do is not look at it all at once, but we're going to take it step by step. Vivid grammar basically tells us that in the same way in verbal grammar we had our 8 parts of speech, in vivid grammar we only have 6 essential picture elements. For our nouns, we draw portraits. For our adjectives, we draw charts. For our prepositions, we draw maps. For tense, we draw timelines. For verbs, complex verbs, we draw flowcharts. And for full sentences, full phrases, sentences and phrases, where we have entire ideas built, we're going to draw our multivariable plots. So these are our 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 elemental pictures that are the building blocks of every idea that we will represent visually. Now for those of you who've been with some of these sessions with me or have been through the cadet lessons, you might see a parallel. You might say, wait a minute, I already know those 6 pictures because those are the same 6 pictures that came of the 6 by 6. You might remember, we drew a portrait, we drew charts, we drew maps, we drew a timeline, we drew flowcharts, and we drew our multivariable plots. And now what you're going to see is the reason why I like vivid grammar so much is it is built on the same neurobiological tools that we've already become familiar with in creating our simple pictorial representations of complex ideas. Now what we're going to do is provide a direct linkage of this tool back to what we already learned in verbal grammar. The 6 pictures are going to now fit together in a very, very specific way. And our little fox might say, oh yeah? They are? And our bird might say, they will? They will. And let me show you how we do this. I'll give you a moment. Have a piece of paper and a pen handy, because rather than my explaining the structure of vivid grammar, I think we should work through it by drawing it out step by step together. The first thing I want you to do is draw a large rectangle that takes up most of your sheet of paper. This is going to be the framework of vivid grammar. And now what I'd like you to do on that square is label it at the top with the words vivid grammar. And now make a dividing line about 1/3 the way down that box. I want you to make a line dividing the bottom 2/3 of the box. I want you to take the bottom third and divide it into half. Next, I want you to take the middle third and divide that up into 3 equal pieces. This is our framework of vivid grammar. Now let's start to fill it in with our 6 elemental types of pictures. The first types of pictures that represent who and what, that represent from a grammatical perspective the nouns of our ideas, are what we call our portraits. And let's draw some. A simple smiley face becomes a portrait of a person. A simple little block car could become the portrait of any kind of car. A cube becomes the portrait of space. These are what I mean by our simple portraits. These are going to represent the nouns of our ideas. Let's continue. In box number 2, we're going to show how much we have of each of these nouns. How big are they? How many are there? These will represent our adjectives. It was a big car. It was a small man. It was a 3-dimensional cube. The adjectives, and the picture that we'll draw to do that is a chart. In this case, we shorthand it by showing a bar chart. Our square in the middle becomes our where area, where we're describing prepositions. Now, prepositions, we recall, are those parts of speech of verbal grammar that describe the spatial location of ideas. Inside, before, after, about, around. Those are prepositions. The pictures that we're going to draw to represent that part of speech, where things are located, are our maps. You'll be familiar with this. Same maps we drew when we were drawing our 6x6. Here's my house. Here's the river. Here's the buried treasure. Here's the path. The visual description of the prepositions that show placement in space of those objects. We're going to now move on to number 4. When. When do things happen in my idea? This, of course, is the visual reflection of tense. We draw our timeline. A happens. Then B happens. Then C happens. This was yesterday. This is today. This is tomorrow. This is tense. When we want to show when things happened in our idea, we draw our timeline. Now, you might notice something that's starting to emerge. Don't draw the next couple of lines with me. I just want to show you. In fact, I'm going to use a different color. What I draw in blue here, I don't want you to draw. I just want you to follow along with me for a moment. Our charts are descriptions of how many and how much we have of our nouns. What our maps do is they show the location of our nouns. What our tense does, our timelines do, is they show the sequence of our nouns. What's now going to happen as we move on to the next two squares is we're going to combine our grammar so that our where plus our when is going to equal this square, and our how much plus our where is going to give us this square. So you'll see what's actually happening is almost a kind of a structural formula of one simple element of the picture leading to the next, leading to the next. So let's go ahead. I'm going to switch back to red now so that you can follow along with me. I want you to draw the things that I draw in red. And we're going to continue on. The combination of where and when is how. How did it work? Where and when did the pieces take place? These become our verbs. What happened? This noun did something. It ran to this noun, and this noun pushed back this noun, which pushed back this one. What we're looking at in our flowchart are the verbs, the what happened in between these objects. How did one influence the other? That's what our flowcharts do. Which brings us to our last picture, which adds up all of the things we've seen before and gives us why. The full sort of phrase or sentence of our idea rendered visually in the form of a multivariable plot where we're plotting out multiple different dimensions of data visually on top of each other so that we can begin to deduce why is it that these things are the way they are, generating an entire visual phrase or a visual sentence. When we put all of those together, we create the entire vivid grammar graph. And that's what you've printed out. We're going to call it the grammar graph. This is the tool that we're going to fall back upon repeatedly whenever we come across an idea expressed verbally and we say, I want to make that idea vivid. I want to layer on a pictorial version of it, not to replace the words, but to complement the words. How would I do that? Well, what we do is we read the words and we start to take them apart, as we did with the preamble to the Constitution, but not just breaking up the sentence into a diagrammatic structure, but actually adding the nouns, the charts, the timelines, and the maps that start to create the pictures that we need in order to see what this text is really trying to tell us. So this is the big sheet. I hope that you'll be able to print it out and use it. And we're going to need to keep it because in our following lessons, we're going to focus on each sector. Okay, how do I specifically render these pictures from these types of words? So that's what we're going to do as we start to apply this. But let me give you a couple of examples quickly to show you how that's actually going to work. I'm going to give you two, and then it's going to be your turn. Example number one. Let's just take a verbal phrase, something I'm sure many of us have heard many times, at least I did when I was a kid. The early bird gets the worm. It's one of these little, sayings that gets a lot of traction. It's been around for a long time, and it's something that you hear, and we hear it so often, any one of these kind of verbal cliches that's got meaning. But after we hear it for a while, we stop to pay attention to the meaning. The early bird gets the worm. Well, okay, that might make sense to our fox, who's really going to try to understand, okay, the early bird is doing something, getting the worm. But what about for our little hummingbird over here, who's flying all around this thing, saying, I want a visual version of that. Let's make it vivid. So let's draw something out. What do? We look at our grammar graph, and we say our noun, well, it was the bird. Let's draw a bird. Here's a bird. Well, it's not just any bird because there's an adjective describing which bird it is. It's the early bird. So let's make it the bird that's getting up with the sun, not the bird that's still sleeping. So we've got two birds here, the early bird and the late bird. Okay, well, something's going to happen to them. Well, the early bird is the one who sees the worm coming out of the little wormhole and is able to grab it. The bird who is not early, by the time that bird wakes up and looks at the hole, what's happened? The worm is gone. So let's add some verbs into here and get a result. The result is that the early bird who saw the worm get something to eat and is happy. The non-early bird who got up too late and missed the worm ends up with a grumbling, empty stomach. Now what we've done is we've made vivid what used to be verbal cliche. And we can see the saying, of course, is not about worms and birds at all. It's about the one who gets up early is the one who sees the prize, is the one who's able to take advantage of it. The one who does not get up early misses the prize and therefore isn't able to take advantage of it. Point being, you might want to think about being the one who gets up early. So now we've made this phrase come to life by making it vivid, and we made it vivid by adding in the visual. And the reason we were able to add in the visual is we broke down the components of that sentence using our grammar graph into these pieces. But let's try one that's a little bit more relevant to how we use ideas and vivid thinking when we talk about business. Call this example the lost user. And this is an example of a technical application that was being developed here in Silicon Valley. And let me show you my verbal summary of the original sales pitch by the people who were making this application. We propose the development of a GPS-enabled application that resides on a mobile device. The purpose of this application is to allow the mobile device to take advantage of geolocation services now available to the general public, thus enabling the device user to pinpoint their location within a split second and to within 100 meters accuracy. We anticipate that this application will have broad appeal to an increasingly mobile workforce. You know what happens when I read this? I look at it and I say, clearly someone has given a lot of thought to their idea. But you know what? It puts me to sleep. I know that there's value in here, but why don't you show it to me? So let's go ahead and use our grammar graph to take apart this sentence and create a parallel visual. Let's do that. And let's start with the who noun, and I think in this case the most important who noun within here is the one that says the user. We have our user, but our user is unhappy. Our user is unhappy because our user is lost. Well, what we think might happen is with our application, our user would pull out their cell phone. That cell phone happens to be GPS enabled, so the user can use their cell phone using this application to see their location and not be lost anymore. Now we've got a vivid description of what had been that rather boring, dry paragraph, and all of a sudden we can see the potential. Oh my gosh, lost user. All I need is a phone. All my phone needs is this application. And of course what this picture doesn't show us, but we know, is that the GPS satellite is up here, which is enabling this location application to work, and now I know where I am. And now if this was a true business proposal, I would be able to say, whoa, if we can make lots and lots of users not lost, if we can make lots and lots of users happy because they are not lost, think how many mobile devices we will be able to sell, and think how many instances of our application we will be able to sell. And in the end, this was a business proposal. This is the picture that suddenly makes sense. Those are the two examples. I'm going to wrap this up and I'm going to share it with your turn. Your homework assignment between now and the next time we meet is to practice vivid grammar. You all should have your PDF. Find a fox, a verbal idea that you like. An idea, again, normally expressed in words. It could be a favorite quotation, a rule, a commandment, a teaching, a lesson, anything that you find compelling that's typically written in words. And what I'd like you to do is use your vivid grammar graph to go through there and see if you can't identify who are some of the nouns and draw portraits of them. Who are some of the verbs and draw flowcharts of them. What are some of the quantities and draw charts of them. And see how the hummingbird begins to make your idea vivid. So in the spirit of that, let's go ahead and look at some student work. And Cody, could you just introduce yourself in 30 seconds and then walk us through your vivid idea, the picture you were drawing, and I'll mark up as we go.
Sure. 30 seconds. So I have a friend named Luke. I've known Luke for about 2 years, and over the course of those 2 years, we've talked a lot about his business. But if somebody out there on the street asked me what Luke does, I wasn't able to tell them. So luckily, Luke let me consult him on the idea of using pictures to solve problems or clarify ideas, as I told him. We worked through the 6x6, and it was very, very insightful for both him and I, maybe even magical, like you sometimes say. So much so that it really changed the direction of where he wanted to take his business. He rewrote the content on his website and some of his other marketing tools. So what I did was try to use Vivid Grammar on his new content to make it even more powerful. And he had a slogan that he liked, which was ideas that power valuable websites. So I took his Fox idea and tried to add the hummingbird to it by creating those pictures.
And should I jump to the next one, Cody, then?
Yeah.
Because I think you also had quite a breakthrough in doing that, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I didn't think that the previous picture really did it.
I'll go back for 1 second. There we have it.
So I just thought, valuable to me meant money. Ideas, of course, lots of light bulbs, power, and websites. I don't really think that tells anybody what his business is, and if it does, it gives them the chance to tell their own stories. But we want to control what people think of his business. So the next slide, Dan, is what I came up with, which was superhuman employees in the form of websites. And this, to me, really says it all in a half of a sentence. If we're trying to sell businesses Luke's services, this, to me, is the most powerful, because what does a business know about the most? Probably employees.
Fantastic. And
business owners don't know a lot about websites. So how can you relate something that they know a lot about to something that they do not know a lot about? I think it should be likened, a website should be likened to an employee that's superhuman, because it can work 24/7 and do all kinds of great things with data, blah, blah, blah.
So is Luke's service one that's using his various web offerings, this thing that comes in the form of websites, to do the work that typically would be done by many different employees?
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. Cody, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's an excellent way of drawing it out. And I'm very intrigued, because the beauty of this picture is now I want to know more. I want to know,
Sure.
Okay, how does he do that? How does it work? How much does it cost? A lot of intriguing questions. So from that regard, the pictures worked perfectly already. So Cody, thanks so much. All right, Shivanand, are you ready to step in?
Yeah, Dan, I'm ready.
Okay, Shivanand, so let me jump ahead to your picture. And Shivanand, could you just give us a very quick 30-second overview of yourself and take us through the picture that you shared with me?
Yeah, Dan, I'm a user experience manager and based out of Hyderabad, India. I work for a company called Pantera Networks. I keep design issues I get in the product. I keep solving them. And I read your book, so that's how I came to know about this Napkin Academy and enrolled myself. And so far, so good.
Excellent. So take us through your picture. I assume this was an offshoot of when we did our lesson on Yahoo.
Yeah, I read a magazine called Net Magazine. That's a web design magazine in which there is a quotation given by Gary Marshall. He's a columnist in that magazine. He says, every time a single site has tried to be the whole internet, it's fallen and fallen hard. So this quotation I took and tried to put Fox View and Hummingbird View. Fox View, very intelligent. It could identify the companies which tried to do that, tried to be the whole internet, and how they have fallen down and fallen down hard, like Yahoo, AOL, and MySpace. Whereas Hummingbird View, it's trying to visualize things and jumping around all the companies. And out of that, I try to create a visual picture, a vivid picture of Yahoo, AOL, and MySpace.
So in fact, what you're showing us and telling us is that these sites that have tried to be everything, Yahoo, AOL, and MySpace, are the ones that have failed, and that those that have focused more specifically have been able to succeed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Dan.
Excellent. Well, Shivanand, thank you very much. I'm going to use this picture in some of my own training because I think this is an excellent example of the difference that exists between those who tried to do it all and those who started out by being very specific in what they were trying to offer. I think also on a side note, since we did spend so much time on our lesson a couple of weeks ago talking about Yahoo, now that Yahoo has a new CEO, Marissa Mayer, formerly from Google, there's going to be some very interesting things that are going to start happening at Yahoo, and we're going to have to start paying attention to that company again. So maybe we'll continue to follow Yahoo and draw our way through it. So this wraps up our session. I want to thank you all so much for providing me with the time and to introduce Vivid Grammar, my favorite tool of all. Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that, and I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.